So in a previous lecture, you learned about Hallmark's framework for character. There's 7 traits of Hallmark character. In this lecture today, we want to cover various frameworks that others have had historically and may have today. And when we were reviewing character, you may have been thinking, well, that's not something I would have included in character, or I hadn't thought of that, or maybe this other part I also consider to be part of character. So we're going to unpack some of those things, explore some of those other frameworks today in this lecture. So first, let's look at some related terms to character. Here's some definitions out of the dictionary for character. It's the mental and moral qualities distinctive to an individual, a person's good reputation. Some other terms that are very similar to character, we have virtue. It's behavior that is showing high moral standards. So notice this is talking about the behavior on the outside, conformity to a standard of right or a particular moral excellence, a commendable quality or trait, so a characteristic as well. And then here looking at the word morals is defined as a person's standards of behavior. So not necessarily the behavior itself, but the standards of behavior or the beliefs on the inside concerning what is and is not acceptable for them to do, of or relating to principles of right and wrong behavior. So notice these things are looking at different parts. You're looking at the outside, the behavior, out here on the outside, also looking at the standards or the beliefs here on the inside of the person. So as we look through character and other frameworks, be paying attention to things that are on the outside, the behaviors, and the things that are on the inside. Now, as we explore various frameworks for character, we want to look for commonalities to the Hallmark character traits. We also want to look for commonalities across culture and across time. What are the commonalities in Western culture versus Eastern culture, or current character traits that we look at versus historic from thousands of years ago? And then we want to distinguish between also traits that address our relationship to others versus our relationship with ourselves. So start to categorize some of these traits. For example, the virtue of justice deals primarily with how we value others, while the virtue of diligence may deal primarily with self-control, how I relate to myself. Now, before we dive into the other character frameworks, just a quick review of Hallmark character. And here's a little trick that might help you remember them. It's class ID, in no particular order. Class ID will help you remember that: communication, leadership, agility, service, stewardship, integrity, and dependability. Communication. Remember, an effective communicator first understands others, then thoughtfully chooses persuasive and truthful words that move towards mutual understanding and a beneficial end. Note that relationship between one another. That's how we describe communication at Hallmark University. Next, looking at leadership. A leader creates value by recognizing opportunities for growth and improvement. Again, this is an external motivation. Then inspiring and developing others to achieve goals with excellence. Remember, this leadership, again, that lens of how does it relate with others. It's not just my own behavior, it's how I relate. Agility. An agile person innovates and adapts from the foundation of character within a continuously changing environment. All right, so there's a core, there's a value, there's a foundation. That doesn't change, but because you have that core foundation that's solid, no matter what happens out in the environment, we're able to adapt to that changing environment without changing our identity, who we are, what we believe in, the values that we embrace, our character. Now, service. A servant serves with the purpose of benefiting others. It's a life that flows out through compassion. Servants understand the needs of others and humbly give assistance. A steward efficiently invests, remember that word invest, we're looking for increased value, available resources to effectively produce excellent results, creating maximum value. And again, that is an outward flowing integrity. A person of integrity exhibits self-control. So now we're looking at an inward trait. How do I lead myself? The person of integrity does the right and good thing regardless of who is watching or if it's deserved, and always seeks and speaks the truth. And here's where integrity begins to flow outward again. Always seeks and speaks the truth to build others up and not to tear down. ID, dependability. A dependable person is reliable, follows through with commitments to others, never gives up, and does whatever it takes to always produce. So that's a long list of virtues or character traits. And there's a lot of commonalities. You see a lot of things in there: truthfulness, a lot of relationship with others, courage, temperance, self-control. Now, something unique, though, about the Greek philosophers is that they believed that character was innate. What does that mean? That we're born with character. And so they believed that not all men were created equal, and that people were different, that some just had character and others didn't. Some were born for leadership, some were born for freedom, and others were born for slavery. And so what is that difference? Think about this. What is the difference between being born with character and having a predisposition towards character? Okay, now you can think about kids, and if any of you have kids, or if you've ever been around kids, or you have a little sibling, you know we don't really come out exhibiting a lot of character. So it's not innate, but that's not the same as having a predisposition towards character or being wired up for a character. You can think of like muscles. We're all born with muscles, but babies are not very strong. They're not born being able to run, but they have the capacity to it. Their muscles are really built for it, but if they never get developed, if they never learn how to use those muscles in a certain way, then they don't grow and develop into their capability, their potential. So character could be the same way. We're born with the muscles for character, the predisposition for character, but empty of it. And we have to develop it as we grow. Now let's take a look at what is generally considered a Western view of character, but is really more of a Near Eastern, and specifically though a Christian view of character. And this is 2,000 years old, looking at these passages here out of the New Testament Bible. When asked what the greatest law was, Jesus answered here in Matthew 22, verses 37 through 40. And he responded with two things. He said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. Look at that. He gave a framework of three components. All your heart, here at the core of who you are, with all your soul in your knowledge, with all your mind, and another version says with all of your strength, so your skills and how you actually behave. He says that's the first and greatest commandment. And then he said the second one is like it. It's similar. He says use that same love, but love horizontally, love your neighbor as you would love yourself. So here's a relationship, a perspective, or a relationship lens of character. And Jesus made this incredible statement or claim. He said all the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. In other words, if you do these two things, which is have love in your heart, love for God, and love for your neighbor as yourself, then you'll fulfill all the law. You won't need all these laws on the outside telling you what to do. Have love in your heart. Now, what is that love? Because we have lots of definitions for love today. It can mean anything from sex to liking something. Oh, I just love that. So here's a quick definition from the New Testament as well, which is in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 4 through 7. It says, love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it is not rude, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, and it keeps no account of wrongs. Love takes no pleasure in evil, but rejoices in the truth, like integrity. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. That's quite a lengthy list from Benjamin Franklin. And I don't know if you noticed in there, but take a note and reflect a little bit. Which of those traits had to do with our relationship with ourselves and our relationship with others? So Franklin brought in quite a few that deal with our relationship with ourself, our self-control, frugality, and maybe more performance-oriented character traits or virtues. Now, on your screen here, you see this is a very interesting part of Benjamin Franklin's framework in that his framework was developed in order that he could improve or develop his character. And so he not only had a framework of those traits, but he also developed a method to improving his character. And it's an approach that I have used myself, and basically just scoring yourself on these character traits and going deliberately and systematically through these character traits and just assessing yourself. How am I doing with this particular trait, with temperance or with frugality or sincerity or justice? And how can I improve in those traits, and just focus on those things for the entire day. That I improve, that I grow today in each of those traits. So it's an interesting framework, not for the virtues themselves, but for growing and developing in virtue. All right, now let's take a look at some contemporary lists of character traits. And here is a collection of some of the most popular ones in the literature today. Positive psychology, character accounts, some of these are brands, some of these are by particular researchers. And this list is presented in order of commonality, the most common traits that each of these have. So you can see some agreement here with terms like care or love, and teamwork, citizenship, which is really our ability to work with others to accomplish things, then fairness and honesty. Now, these first four, are they focused on inward-facing traits that relate with ourselves, or with outward-facing traits, compared with self-control and diligence? So notice that these first four are all about how we relate to others, and self-control and diligence are really about how we lead ourself, how we lead ourself and our integrity with what we follow through with. And here's a follow-on list with other terms that are round out that list. You can see things like kindness, humility. Humility is a very interesting character trait. You don't see it directly in Hallmark traits, but it's really a self-assessment. It's placing yourself in the right perspective with others, or the right relationship with others. Okay, now let's go around the world to the Eastern or Asia and look at character or virtue in Eastern cultures. So looking at Confucianism and Taoism. As we go through this, look at which virtues are consistent or congruent with the hallmark character traits or your own traits. Look how we start off here with love, with justice, with truthfulness. Here's justice, self-regulation, which is like self-control, and then humanity. Humanity is a great one. And while it's not spelled out in the same way, how is that consistent with the traits that we hold dear at Hallmark University? Well, humanity is all about valuing humans, valuing another human being. And how valuable are other human beings? And because often if we devalue somebody, if we dehumanize somebody, we can now kind of justify in our own mind treating them as less, and we can place somebody in a servitude or a slave role, or take advantage of them or take from them if we devalue somebody. But this virtue of humanity is really about valuing other human beings. And when we value somebody as infinitely valuable, now we won't take advantage of them. We won't take from them. We will want to even serve them and increase their value. Some unique ones that we don't see explicitly called out are wisdom and perhaps etiquette here, or especially spontaneity and naturalness. So those are interesting virtues to consider, and just reflect and pause about how these correspond or are congruent with your own virtues. Now let's take a completely different look. And this study that is on the slide here, the Globe study of CEO leadership behavior and effectiveness, was not really looking for character or for virtue, but was looking for characteristics of effective leaders, or at least perceived effective leaders, all around the world. In order to understand, does a leader look different in the East or the Middle East or the West or in other parts of the world? And so what we have here on the left here are a list of the most commonly held or espoused or prioritized traits around the world. And what do we see here? We see high levels of integrity. All right, we see willing to sacrifice self-interest. In other words, I'm not trying to take for myself, but I really want to build up those around me. And inspirational, wanting to add value towards others. Now notice also the lowest traits are being self-centered. So this is what is not highly regarded all over the world, being self-centered, wanting to take from others, especially malevolent, right? And autocratic, not considering others, just trying to enslave basically others around them. So this is an interesting look to understand around the world. Do different cultures have common virtues and common character traits that they hold dear?